Welcome to New Mavericks, Game-Changing Leadership Insights. We're here on our continuing series of talking to some of the leaders in the field to help inform our quest. Our quest, as you know, is for integrated success. We want to take you into that place which we've called the integration zone that takes peak performance and being in the zone to the next level on a sustainable level so you really own that zone. And part of that process is talking to a leader we have here today, a leader in the area of brain research, because we're going to be talking about the leader's brain. We want to go beyond just motivational and inspirational practices. We want to find those best practices that really can stabilize and integrate that zone kind of thinking. And the brain is a great place to start because we found from some of our previous conversations that this mind-brain integration seems to be the active ingredient in creating this level of peak performance. So welcome, Alaric.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here with you and New Mavericks.
That's great. And I should just say a few words about Dr. Aranander. We'll call him Alaric. He's been doing this kind of brain research for 45 years. I know that looks like he started it at 5, but he's been on faculty at UCLA, Meru in Switzerland. He's the director of the Brain Research Institute and president of the Leaders Brain Consulting Group. So, you really have made a specialty of optimizing the creative potential, both on a personal level, individual level, and with organizations. Tell us, what's happening in the whole field of brain research that can inform what we're talking about for the leader's brain?
Michael, I think this is a wonderful time for leaders to understand that neuroscience has a tremendous amount now to offer every leader to upgrade the executive brain, to take each brain and maximize its creative potential. We have undergone now in the last 5-10 years a revolution in neuroscience, where instead of just focusing on little pieces of the brain, which we continue to do, and it's a wise thing to do, we're now expanding our vision from this local focus to a more global perspective. This global perspective means now we're seeing how do these brain cells, 100 billion brain cells in every CEO, how do those 100 billion brain cells work together to create good thoughts, good feelings, good organizational behavior? And now we have these networks, this local and global integration. We know these areas of the brain and what they do, and have some idea, but now we're finding how we integrate it all together into these network understandings.
I think it's fascinating because some of the words you use, it reminds me of, there's a quote from E.F. Schumacher that says, think locally, but act globally. And what I see is a parallel between the architecture of the brain and the architecture inside a great leader. And there's some parallels, like, for example, acting locally, thinking globally. What's the relationship between those two, and how is it so important for leadership?
So for modern neuroscience, what we find is that it's capable of offering technologies to globally rewire the brain, not deal with these specific fragments of leadership, but deal with the wholeness of leadership. We want the whole brain of the leader to be more orderly. We want to find ways to feed orderliness into the brain of the CEO, so that at every moment in that day of that life, he can function or she can function in a much more orderly and therefore successful way.
So this idea of orderly, you saw choice points of order. Elaborate on that in terms of what we can actually do to kind of stay on that pathway of just being really on.
The brain adapts. That's what it's all about. The brain changes every moment of our life. This is called neuroplasticity. We now know in the last 20, 30 years of research that our brain is changing every day. There's very little in our brain that was there last week or the week before. The contacts have changed, the myelin has changed, the wiring. The whole system has adapted to whatever we put into the system. So if you've put in orderliness during that last day or week or hour, then your brain will develop around that orderliness and mold itself to that input. If you put in less orderliness, we call that disorderliness, like less sleep, or too much alcohol, or too much stress, or too much sedimentary behavior. If you put in sources of disorder, the brain will adapt to that as well, because that's what it's trying to do, and give you the best sluggish, sleepless, stressed brain, the function under those circumstances. It's going to knock down what it could be to help you survive on what you are right now. If you want to be more, you've got to give it more of that orderliness. And neuroscience has technologies and understanding of how that takes place.
So technologies, now you're getting into practical considerations. What are some of the things we can do to kind of create create that level of order, that level of, we can call it on-trackness. It's a new word, on-trackness. I want to be on trackness.
We have, just as it is in everything, we have specific approaches to life and we have more general approaches to life. We could say local and global. Just like in neuroscience, we study local things and we study more global problems. In leadership, we have local considerations and we have globalization and its concerns. So the same thing's true with technologies. If we want to bring more orderliness to the human brain, we can go after specific things. If you want to have a more orderly motor system, you just practice drumming or bicycle riding or violin playing, and your brain will become more orderly in the motor system because that's what you're driving. You're putting orderliness into that specific part. You can do it in terms of language. You can do it in terms of any specific quality of cognitive function or emotion. And there are training programs for that. Leaderships can pay for that. But there are also programs that are globally impactful that will take the whole brain and lift the whole thing together into a much more upgraded, much more integrated style of functioning. Now, some of these are simple and well-known. Some are less well-known.
So what are the most globally impactful practices we can...
Well, the obvious ones, the ones that we have a tendency to ignore but are always reminded of us in our lives, is, for example, exercise. We know that when you exercise, not only is your cardiovascular system better and your digestion is better and your waistline is better, but your brain is better. Exercise is so important for the brain. The brain loves exercise, not because it's downtime, but because you're feeding it trophic factors. You're feeding it good material. And when the brain gets exercise, not only is it healthier, for a number of reasons, but it also makes more brain cells. Exercise is one of the best ways to create new brain cells every single day of your life. And new brain cells means you have now more potential you can use in the future. So exercise is one thing.
We know that exercise is a given. It's just a matter of implementing it. How
Right.
about diet?
Diet's also very important. It's another global approach. It's not working on motor system or something. It's having a healthy brain as a whole. And we know that there are better diets and worse diets. We don't have to go into specifics because everybody knows what those should be, and there's 1,000 diet books. However, there are supplements too that can help. There are B vitamins and the omega-3s, which research has now shown to be really important to developing the full ability of the brain to function well and develop well.
Okay, so we got exercise, we got diet,
Right.
including some of these things. I want to get down to the deepest level of active ingredient that really is going to transform the leader's
The
brain.
most important thing is rest. If we don't get enough rest, the brain will not develop its full potential. It's experienced every day. If you don't get a good night's sleep, you're not in very good shape the next day. At the end of the week, after all that build-up fatigue, people will start breaking down. So rest is absolutely important. Rest means orderliness. Rest means you give the brain a chance to fix what it needs to do, to fix new memories, to fix the cells, to fix the hormones, to fix the digestive system. Rest means order, which means creative potential. So if you want to be more, if the leader wants to be more, that leader has to invest in rest. And there are many forms of rest.
So it's not just sleep, you're saying?
Well, we should remind people about sleep because most people don't get enough sleep. We have a normal, natural sleep need, and if we don't give it, then we're falling back. All
You
right?
said one interesting thing there I want to interject. You said something about getting down to that place of order, and you made it synonymous with creative potential. What's the relationship between order and creative potential? Because creativity is that's the bottom line, the buzzword of what every leader needs to be flexible and fluent enough to handle any situation.
Right. Creativity is the most important thing in business today. If you're not creative, you're not going to be there tomorrow. So a leader needs to cultivate his or her own creativity and that of its institutional structure. Creativity comes from your brain, obviously, less so from the liver and your big toe. So your brain is obviously important. Now, in your brain, you have an important region called the prefrontal cortex. This is considered the CEO of the CEO of the mail clerk, the CEO of the engineer. This is the controlling central domain of executive action.
The technical term I've heard used is the smarty pants portion of the brain, correct?
Exactly. That's the scientific term for it. That this is the smarty pants, the CEO, okay? This is the head honcho. Or if you want, this is the big enchilada, okay? These are the scientific terms, okay? in the lunchroom. So basically, we have the front of the brain, which is the most important executive control center. It's in charge of all the important things, all right? Not how you hold your fork and not how you write on a paper, but it's important for your sense of self, how you feel about yourself and how you feel about other people. It's important for your values. What are your values? What do you care about in life? What are your belief systems? It's all structured here in the orderliness of your prefrontal cortex. If this is reduced, then the value systems are reduced. So values, beliefs, sense of self, creativity, intelligence, decision-making, self-control, stopping emails at 11 o'clock at night, maybe going to sleep as opposed to continuing for another 2 hours on emails. We have to have our prefrontal cortex be the most orderly. It will allow for the most creativity and therefore for the best, most successful form of thinking and behavior.
I see the direction we're going. We've been talking about increasing the level of orderliness, how that maximizes creative potential. Now we've isolated that the most important area to create order is the prefrontal cortex.
It's the
I'm
control
learning
point.
here on this. Okay, so now the question is, how do you maximize the potential of the prefrontal cortex? What are the best practices for that?
Well, we can take a specific approach and train it for attention, or train it for memory, or train it for control of distraction. And there are training programs for this. And they can have short-term effects, and they can have some benefit. But that's not what we want. We want the prefrontal cortex itself and its relationship to the rest of the brain to be fully integrated. For that, we need global approaches. We want to rewire the whole brain, and we want to do it in a very effective way, which will be complementary to all the more specific training programs. Okay. It's not the other training programs are of no value, but their value actually depends upon how the whole brain is functioning at one point. If you want to learn the violin, you have to be awake, you have to be motivated, you have to be careful, you have to be everything, including motor. So a CEO requires a whole brain, and we need to have ability to globally rewire it.
I know you've done a lot of research on brain coherence. You were one of the pioneers in the field. So what have you learned about what maximizes this kind of brain coherence?
Well, it was back in 1974 we were studying meditation of all things. Back then it wasn't a popular topic, but it is now. And back in 74 we showed that when people were meditating, that the brain became, within a few moments, globally coherent, integrated. If we wanted integration, this was like, wow. I mean, we've never seen this before. You can't get this in sleep. You can't get this. It was never published before. And it hasn't actually been published since, except for this meditation gave this level of orderliness to the brain. And then we asked, well, if there's more orderliness to the prefrontal cortex, does this show up actually in behavior, in moral reasoning, in creativity? And yes, when there's more orderliness, more coherence of your prefrontal cortex, your moral compass is more on. You are more creative. You're more emotionally stable, you're more sense of self, your mind-body coordination is better, you're more intelligent, on and on and on. It's the center of all these key aspects of what a leader wants to be and needs to be. And these simple techniques of meditation can really deliver that to anybody.
What have you found I know you said there's a number of forms of meditation. What have you found to be the most effective forms of meditation?
Every form of meditation does something. That's why people do all these different meditations. Every meditation offers, in general, every meditation will offer you some reduction in stress, reduction in anxiety, the ability to maybe have less pain and discomfort and so forth. But there's a range of meditations in terms of the technology. And those range of meditations have to do with whether it's very specific and focused and effortful, or it's very non-specific and non-effort. So there's a whole range. Are going to be more effort in my meditation, or less effort, or no effort. And in that range, we see different benefits from those different techniques and therefore the different brain states created. If you're sitting in meditation, and of course when people do this, and they put attention in and concentrate and control, they will have some benefit. But the brain will be disallowed from actually really resting. On the other extreme, there's forms of transcendental meditation. There's a transcendental meditation where the body and the mind can actually settle down to what's a ground zero. Just absolutely very, very quiet. This is the deepest form of rest we've ever seen in modern science. And that deepest form of rest translates as maximum orderliness, maximum coherence of the brain, and it shows up in every facets of life. Cognitive, emotional, behavioral, physiological, aging. Everything gets better when you feed that brain orderliness at this global level.
So
you rewire the brain globally for maximum benefit.
Our whole goal is to create the best practices that maximize the result with the least amount of effort. So in principle, I love this concept of meditation that goes down to that level of least effort. So it seems that transcendental meditation, that's actually the name of it, one that you study?
This is what I've been studying personally for the last 40, 50 years, yes. That this simple technique, which requires only a few minutes twice a day, and a CEO has very little time. We're talking about time management here. So you have to invest in something new, right? Do you have to talk to this consultant or talk to this coach, or what do you do with your time? If you spend 10 or 15, 20 minutes twice a day with your eyes closed, being completely settled in that deeply, maximally orderly, maximally restful state, you come back out in a very powerful, coherent, focused mode. I'll give you an example. A CEO can work hard all day long. At the end of the day, let's say it's 6 o'clock at night, they can spend 15, 20 minutes of meditation. When they come out of that meditation and open their eyes, there's nothing left of that day in terms of fatigue or anxiety or concern or confusion or anything. They are like wired for another period of time. Clarity, energy, focus. This is a huge flip around. This meditation resets the system, it globally rewires it, it upgrades the executive brain. This is the ultimate competitive edge for any executive.
So now you're talking, Alaric, because what we find with so many of the people that we consult with, which is one of the key variables that they all talk about, is help me stay on track. Help me stay just on that, right on the edge, which is kind of being in the zone. So what you're saying is that meditation, which has this global effect, is probably one of the best ways to stay on track? Is that what you're describing?
Right, wakefulness. You're going to be on track, whatever that track is, and nobody knows what that is. In fact, you don't know what that track is except for each moment. Each moment leads to the next moment, and the track evolves during the day. And somebody who's a really good CEO doesn't predicate, this is where I'm going. CEO says, these are my values, and these are my intentions, but each moment I'm ready to be fully adaptable and resilient to take advantage of the next opportunity. And so being on track is an unknown until you're there. But being on trackness means that you have the potential, the adaptability of the brain, the orderliness to make advantage of every single opportunity. So at the end of the day, you've maxed it out. And yet you've never gotten tired or fatigued or upset or stressed.
You're making a great case for, we do want to focus on these specific values.
It's not a case, this is research. This is research.
I get it. So you've made this great evidence-based approach, understanding that there's a certain value, there's specific approaches, but this global approach is the most important. In addition to exercise, diet, you're talking about meditation as being really one of the active ingredients. And the theme that you've also brought out is digesting order. All the things that we do, the choice points that we make in our life, that more order and less. And even if I'm not looking at it scientifically, intuitively, on a common sense level, staying up all night is not going to increase order. Going out drinking at night is not going to increase order. So now, with all that said, let's just see if we can close this in saying, now on an anecdotal level, outside being a scientist, saying you've worked in the brain research field, in the lab, you've also worked with a lot of CEOs, top leaders, entrepreneurs. What do you see as the most important opportunity there for their growth, and also some of the greatest challenges? What would you say as a closing?
Michael, I think what we need to understand is that every brain has a huge potential. I stand in front of a room, and say there's 100 CEOs and top managers, and I look out across all these people and I go, by research, 1% will probably reach their potential on the average. Another 3 or 4% sprinkled in the audience, they're doing really good. But the rest of them, about 90, 95% of all those ladies and gentlemen out there in the audience, they haven't even begun to use their potential. I mean, not even begun. They're on the average zone, the norm it's called in society. They just happen to be in business as opposed to sports or education or medicine. So I look out of it and I think, my God, look at the neuroplasticity waiting to be used. The brain is plastic. It's willing to do anything. You put orderliness into it, and it will suck that orderliness up, and it will create a brain which is very powerful, very resilient, very adaptable. And that's what I do when I see these audiences and I meet individually. I see these people with this huge potential. We have so much potential in every single brain. And we know that these global approaches now, these global technologies that are available, We mentioned their exercise and diet and meditations and things like this. These things actually work. The science is all there. And so all we need to do is employ them. And it will make everything else work in our life better. It'll make every other consulting program work better. Any program you want to work depends upon primarily the wakefulness of the individual. If that person is not really awake, not really present, then that program is reduced in its effectiveness. So this is a program to support all programs. You want to globally rewire the brain. You got to upgrade the whole executive structure of the brain, the architecture, the prefrontal cortex. You need to get the whole thing globally rewired, and then there's success.
That's what we're looking for. I see the potential for this integrated success because we're looking for approaches that maximize the result with the least amount of effort. And what you're talking about here, this global approach, seems to accomplish that. So I thank you for coming here, helping us on our quest for integrated success. It's been great talking with you, Alaric. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure, Michael.
All right.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed the interview, and now I want to give you a few action steps. If you're watching this on YouTube, take a moment to go to newmavericks.com. And if you're already on the site, take a look and enjoy, and be sure to click on the Holy Grail icon. That'll take you to the Integrated Success Quest page. At the bottom of that page, you have a couple options for your action steps. One, you can download our 3 steps to being in the zone. And if you'd like to go a little farther, you can try a 30-minute free integration zone session where our leaders and consultants will take you into that zone, assess your level of integration, and more important, what you can do about it. So we look forward to you joining us on our Integrated Success Quest. See you on the path.